The impossible match. Princess Zyra stood in the middle of the grand spaceport, arms crossed, waiting impatiently as her royal guards cleared the path ahead. She had traveled across the galaxy for an important diplomatic mission, but she never expected this. Her soulmate device was flashing wildly on her wrist, its bright golden glow impossible to ignore. She frowned, tapping the small device. "This must be a mistake," she muttered. The soulmate device was an ancient technology used by the Zayari species to find their destined partners. It only activated when the perfect match, both genetically and spiritually, was near. But Sarah had never believed in fate. She had seen others obsess over their readings, but she refused to let a machine control her future. Yet now it was glowing. And worse, it was vibrating like never before. The guards around her tensed, confused by the sudden reaction of the device. Nobles and diplomats nearby whispered among themselves. "Princess Zyra," one of the guards said carefully, "your device is active. Your destined mate must be close." Zyra let out an irritated sigh. "Impossible. The only people here are traders, travelers, and—" She paused as her gaze swept across the crowded terminal. Then she saw him, a human. He stood near the boarding gates, dressed in a simple dark jacket and carrying a heavy bag over one shoulder. He looked rugged, tall, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes that scanned the crowd with curiosity. His stance was relaxed, but something about him felt different. The moment their eyes met, the soulmate device went wild. It pulsed stronger, sending out rings of golden light. People around them gasped, stepping away. Zyra's heart pounded. No, 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 no. This cannot be right. The human, Logan Carter, blinked in confusion. He glanced down at the glowing device on her wrist, then at her face, and then back at the device. Did I do something wrong?" he asked in a calm but cautious tone. Zyra clenched her jaw. This was humiliating. A human. Out of all the beings in the galaxy, her soulmate was a human. "Who are you?" she demanded, stepping forward. Logan raised an eyebrow. "Logan Carter. Traitor. Former space marine. And you?" "Princess Zyra of the Zayari Empire." Logan gave a small nod. "Ha. Fancy title. So, why is your wrist glowing like that?" Zyra groaned, ignoring the whispers growing louder around her. "Because, for some ridiculous reason, my device thinks you are my soulmate." Logan blinked, then he chuckled. "Wait. Me? Your soulmate? That's unexpected." Unexpected was an understatement. The Zayari and humans were not even considered biologically compatible. No human had ever been paired with a Zayari before. One of the royal guards stepped forward. "Princess, we must report this immediately. The High Council will need to verify the match." Zyra scowled. "The device is malfunctioning. It has to be." But deep down, doubt crept into her mind. The soulmate device had never malfunctioned before. If it was reacting this strongly, there had to be a reason. Meanwhile, Logan glanced at the guards, then back at Tyra. "Look, I don't know how these things work, but I can tell you one thing. I don't believe in fate." Zyra narrowed her eyes. "Neither do I." "Then we agree on something." Logan sighed. "So, what now?" Before Zyra could respond, the soulmate device suddenly sent out a strong pulse of energy. The entire spaceport trembled. Security alarms blared, and holographic displays flickered. The ground beneath them seemed to shake as the device's glow became blinding. A group of Zayari officials rushed forward. "Princess Zyra, step back," one of them ordered. Zyra felt a strange pull, like something was linking her to Logan in ways she couldn't explain. She took a shaky breath. "This is bad," she muttered. Logan crossed his arms. "Yeah, starting to feel like I walked into something big." The lead official turned to Logan. "Human, you must come with us. The council needs to determine the truth of this bond immediately." Logan frowned. "And if I say no?" Zaira scoffed. Then you'll probably be arrested. Logan sighed and looked at her. Great. So, Princess, are we soulmates or prisoners? Zaira gritted her teeth. She had no answer. But one thing was clear. Her life had just changed forever. Forced together. Logan Carter sat in an unfamiliar room, his arms crossed as he studied the guards stationed at the entrance. The moment he had been identified as Princess Zaira's so-called soulmate, he had been whisked away by a group of serious-looking Zayari officials. Now he was in a high-security government facility, deep inside the Zayari capital. The walls were smooth, metallic, and pulsing with blue energy, humming softly as if the building itself was alive. The air smelled sterile, like nothing had ever lived here before. Across from him, Princess Zaira stood stiffly, her golden eyes locked onto the massive screen displaying their test results. She hadn't spoken a word since they had arrived, but Logan could see the tension in her shoulders. She wasn't happy about this. Neither was he. An older Zayari scientist, dressed in flowing robes, cleared his throat. Princess Zaira, human Logan Carter, we have conducted the genetic verification. Zaira straightened. And the scientist hesitated, glancing at the results again as if he himself couldn't believe them. The match is 100% confirmed. Logan let out a slow breath. That's new. Zaira turned sharply toward the scientist. That's impossible. Humans and Zayari are not biologically compatible. There must be a mistake. The scientist shook his head. The device does not lie, Your Highness. The connection is real. Your bond with this human is undeniable. Zaira's expression darkened. There has never been a human-Zayari match in our history. How do you explain this? Logan, who had been silent so far, leaned back in his chair and smirked. Maybe fate finally got bored. Zaira shot him a glare. This isn't funny. I don't know, Logan said, stretching his arms. Feels like a pretty funny situation to me. Zaira turned back to the scientist. Redo the test. The scientist shook his head. It has already been performed twice. The results remain the same. A heavy silence filled the room. Zaira clenched her fists, clearly struggling to process the situation. Logan, on the other hand, found it amusing, until he noticed the tension in the air. Something wasn't right. The scientist hesitated before speaking again. Your Highness, there is another problem. Zaira narrowed her eyes. What problem? The scientist gestured toward the screen. The Soulmate Device doesn't simply determine compatibility. It is also linked to our ancient traditions. According to our laws, a confirmed soulmate match is binding. Logan sat up straight. Wait, what do you mean binding? The scientist exhaled slowly. Once a match is verified, the pair is required to undergo a courtship trial to test their bond. If they refuse, he hesitated. Zaira's jaw tightened. Then what? The scientist lowered his voice. You will both be exiled. Together. Logan blinked. Excuse me. Zaira stepped forward, her voice sharp. You cannot be serious. The law is clear, Your Highness. Logan ran a hand through his hair. So let me get this straight. You're saying we have two choices. One, we go through this courtship trial and pretend we're in some kind of fairy tale romance. Or two, we both get kicked out of Zayari space and tossed into the void together. The scientist nodded. That is correct. Logan let out a low whistle. Wow, gotta say, that's one hell of a first date. Zaira turned to face him fully, arms crossed. Do not assume I will agree to this. Logan raised an eyebrow. You think I'd want this? Their eyes locked. The tension between them was thick. Logan could tell that Zaira despised this situation as much as he did. But then something happened. The Soulmate Device on Zaira's wrist pulsed again, sending out a sudden wave of energy that made the lights flicker. The room trembled slightly. Logan felt a strange pull in his chest. Something deep, something unnatural. For the first time, He saw something in Xyra's eyes. Fear. The scientist took a step back. That is not normal. Xyra clutched her wrist, her breathing uneven. Why is this happening? Logan frowned. He could feel something in the air, something invisible but powerful. I don't know what's going on, but I think we just lost our right to choose. Before anyone could respond, the doors to the room burst open. A group of heavily armed Zayari soldiers stormed in, followed by a regal-looking noblewoman dressed in deep red robes. Her piercing silver eyes locked onto Xyra. "Princess," the woman said, her voice cold and sharp. "This match is an abomination. It cannot be allowed." Xyra's expression hardened. "Lady Velis," she said, her tone laced with venom. "I should have known you'd interfere." Velis sneered. "The High Council will not stand for this. A human cannot be bound to the royal bloodline. If you refuse to reject this match, you will be stripped of your title and cast out forever." Logan let out a slow breath. "So, to sum it up, I'm either your soulmate, your prison sentence, or your death sentence." He smirked slightly. "This just keeps getting better." Xyra glared at him. "If you say one more word, human, I will end you myself." But even as she spoke, the Soulmate device pulsed again, brighter than before. Logan felt another pull, like something deep inside him was waking up. And this time, he knew something far bigger was at play here. The hidden truth. The tension in the chamber was suffocating. Logan Carter sat with his back against the cold metal wall of the royal holding cell, watching the Zayari guards stationed outside. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his face. Just hours ago, he was a simple trader, moving cargo between distant colonies. Now he was a political prisoner, accused of breaking some ancient Zayari law, just by existing. Across the cell, Princess Xyra sat stiffly on a floating metallic bench, arms crossed, staring at the floor. For the first time since meeting her, she wasn't speaking. The golden glow of her Soulmate device had dimmed, but it still pulsed softly, like a heartbeat, a reminder that their bond, whatever it was, refused to disappear. Logan broke the silence. "So this is fun. Royal prisons, arranged marriages, angry nobles trying to erase my existence. Definitely not what I signed up for when I woke up this morning." Xyra shot him a glare, but her usual sharp retort didn't come. Instead, she let out a long breath and closed her eyes. He frowned. This was different. She looked troubled. "All right, Princess," Logan said, sitting up. "Talk to me. What's going on?" She hesitated. For a moment, it seemed like she was about to ignore him. But then she lifted her gaze, and for the first time, Logan saw something other than annoyance in her expression. Fear. "The Soulmate device has never reacted like this before," she admitted quietly. Logan tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Xyra hesitated before continuing. "The device is supposed to guide us to our destined partners. It confirms a bond and strengthens it over time." But she trailed off, gripping her wrist. "But what?" Logan pressed. Her golden eyes met his. "It's forcing the bond." A chill ran down his spine. "I don't understand," Logan said, shaking his head. "Isn't that how it's supposed to work?" "No," Xyra whispered. "Soulmate devices do not create bonds. They only detect them. They are not meant to push a connection that isn't there." Logan exhaled, rubbing his temples. "So what you're saying is, this thing is glitching out." Xyra shook her head. "It's not a malfunction. It's something else. Something I don't understand." Before Logan could respond, the door to their cell slammed open. A tall, regal-looking Zayari noble stepped in, flanked by two heavily armed guards. Logan recognized her from earlier, the one who wanted to erase their bond. Lady Velis. Her silver eyes flicked between them before settling on Xyra. "I gave you time to reconsider, Princess. Have you come to your senses?" Xyra's expression turned cold. "If you're here to make threats, you're wasting your time." Velas smirked. "This is not a threat, my dear. It is a solution." She turned to the guards. "Bring in the scientist." A moment later, an elderly Zyari scientist entered the room, his face pale. He carried a small glowing device in his hands, a different kind of technology, one that Logan hadn't seen before. Zyra stiffened. "What is that?" Velas smiled. "A device that can sever the soulmate bond." Logan's stomach dropped. "Hold on," he said, standing. "You're telling me you can remove this connection?" "Precisely," Velas said smoothly. "Your presence is a stain on the Zyari royal bloodline. This match is unnatural. But we have the means to correct this mistake. You will feel nothing, just a momentary disruption. And then, freedom." Zyra's jaw clenched. "You're playing with something you don't understand." Velas let out a quiet chuckle. "I understand that my people will never accept a human as part of our empire. And I also understand that you, princess, were never meant to be tied to such a primitive creature." Logan rolled his shoulders. "You're really going all in on the insults today, huh?" Velas ignored him and turned to Zyra. "This is your last chance. You can walk away from this with your title, your future, and your dignity intact." Zyra's hands curled into fists. Logan could see the conflict in her eyes. She didn't want this bond. She didn't want to be tied to a human. And yet, Logan could feel something in the air, a weight pressing down on his chest, a strange pull toward the princess sitting across from him. He knew it wasn't love. It wasn't even attraction. It was something deeper, something he couldn't explain. He exhaled and looked at Zyra. "Your call, princess." Silence. Then, Zyra lifted her chin and stared directly at Velas. "No." The air shifted. Logan felt it, something powerful surging between them. The soulmate device on Zyra's wrist flared to life, brighter than ever before. The scientist holding the severance device staggered back as a shockwave pulsed from the device, sending a ripple of energy through the room. The guards shouted in alarm. Velas hissed, shielding her eyes. "What is this?" Zyra clutched her wrist, her breathing heavy. "You wanted proof. Here it is. The bond is real." The scientist gasped. "Impossible. The device, it's resisting the severance process." Logan gritted his teeth. "Yeah, I'm starting to think we don't get to choose this bond." Suddenly, a new alarm blared. A mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "Alert. Unauthorized energy disturbance detected. External forces interfering with soulmate bond verification. Security breach imminent." The room shook. Zyra's eyes widened. "What's happening?" The scientist checked his readings, his face turning pale. Someone is trying to interfere with your bond from the outside." Velas' expression hardened. "Who?" A holographic screen flickered to life on the wall. At first, it was just static. Then, slowly, an image formed. A hooded figure with piercing blue eyes stared back at them. The figure's voice was distorted, ancient, yet powerful. "You should not exist." The lights flickered again. The soulmate device on Zyra's wrist began to glow out of control, sending out rapid pulses of energy. Zyra staggered. Logan reached out, steadying her as the force of the energy nearly knocked her down. The hooded figure spoke again. "You are the first, but you will not be the last." The screen shattered. The alarms screamed. The guards shouted. And in that moment, Logan knew this was so much bigger than just fate. This was a battle that had already begun. A bond beyond science. Logan Carter's heart pounded as the holographic screen shattered into static. The room trembled, and the soulmate device on Zyra's wrist pulsed like a dying star, flickering between gold and white. The hooded figure's words echoed in his mind. "You should not exist." A weight settled in his chest, heavy, suffocating. This wasn't just about an unusual soulmate match. Something far bigger was happening, something wrong. Zyra staggered against the shockwave. And without thinking, Logan grabbed her arm, steadying her. The moment his fingers touched her skin, the device flared again. This time, a soft warmth spread through his body. It wasn't painful. It wasn't harsh. It felt like recognition. His breath caught. Zyra's golden eyes flicked to his, her pupils narrowing. She felt it too. The guards were shouting, scrambling to contain the power surge, but the Soulmate device was beyond control now. The readings on the scientist's monitor flickered wildly, unable to process the sheer energy radiating from Zyra's wrist. "This isn't possible," the scientist murmured, his hands shaking. "The device isn't just activating, it's evolving." Lady Velas, still reeling from the shock, slammed her hands against the table. "Shut it down. Now." The scientist tried, but the device refused to be controlled. The golden glow intensified. And suddenly, Logan felt his mind pull in a direction he had never felt before. It wasn't a physical movement. It was deeper, like a thread tying him to something long forgotten. Then, he saw it. For a brief second, his vision wasn't his own. He was standing somewhere else, somewhere ancient. Massive stone pillars surrounded him, carved with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. The air was thick with whispers, voices speaking a language he didn't understand, yet somehow recognized. A figure stood before him, draped in ceremonial robes, holding something in their hands. Two glowing rings intertwined, pulsating in sync, the same glow that came from Zyra's wrist. Then, it was gone. Logan gasped, his mind snapping back to reality. The chamber, the guards, the alarms. Ira's grip on his arm was tight, her breathing uneven. "You saw it," she whispered. Logan swallowed. "Yeah." Before they could process it, the doors slammed open. A squad of heavily armored Zayari warriors stormed in, weapons raised. Behind them, an official in silver robes strode forward, one of the High Council members. His face was unreadable, but his deep blue eyes burned with intent. "Princess Zyra," he announced, his voice firm. "Logan Carter, you are hereby ordered to stand before the High Council. Immediately." Zyra's shoulders tensed. For what reason? The councilman's eyes flicked toward the still glowing device on her wrist. For the truth. The High Council chamber. The chamber was massive. An open, circular hall with transparent walls revealing the vastness of space beyond. 12 Zayari elders sat in a half-circle, their robes shimmering under the soft, ethereal glow of the chamber's central energy source. Logan felt out of place. Zyra stood beside him, back straight, her royal presence unshaken. She had been raised in these halls, trained for diplomacy, but even she seemed wary of what was coming next. The council leader, a tall, elderly Zayari named Soulrian, stepped forward. His gaze swept over them before settling on Zyra's wrist. "The Soulmate device has spoken," he said. "And yet this bond is unlike any we have ever seen. We must understand why." Zyra exhaled sharply. "I would like to know the same." Soulrian gestured, and a holographic projection appeared above them, showing a timeline of Zayari history. Thousands of years of records scrolled past in mere seconds. "The first Soulmate devices were not created by us," Soulrian revealed. "They were discovered." Zyra's head snapped up. "What?" Logan frowned. "Wait, hold on. You're saying you didn't invent these things?" Soulrian nodded. "We found them on a long-dead world, buried deep beneath its surface. The civilization that once used them is gone, wiped from history. We only adapted the technology." Zyra's voice was low. "Then what does that mean for us?" The holographic display shifted, showing something new, an ancient record, a fragment of text so old it was barely readable. "The chosen will awaken when the past is remembered." A chill ran down Logan's spine. Soulrian's gaze darkened. "We believe the Soulmate device recognized something in you both, something not just genetic, but ancient." Zyra's breath caught. Logan clenched his fists. ancient. Before he could ask what that meant, the doors burst open again. A group of masked figures stormed in, rogue Zayari, carrying weapons unlike anything Logan had seen before. One of them pointed straight at Xyra. The prophecy must not come to pass. Blinding light filled the chamber. Chaos erupted. Guards shouted. The council scrambled for cover. Logan moved without thinking, grabbing Xyra and pulling her behind a pillar just as an explosion rocked the hall. Xyra gritted her teeth. They're trying to kill us. Logan's instincts kicked in. Yeah, I noticed. Blaster fire rang out. The High Council's elite guards fought back. But the masked figures were fast, their movements precise. They weren't just assassins. They were believers. Believers in something dangerous. Logan ducked as another blast shattered a nearby column. He turned to Xyra. You still don't believe in fate? Xyra's eyes burned with determination. Fate isn't real. Logan smirked. Yeah. Then explain why people keep trying to kill us over it. Xyra's lips pressed into a thin line. Then, with a flash of movement, she reached for the weapon of a fallen guard and fired back. Logan grabbed another blaster and followed her lead. The battle was short, but brutal. One by one, the masked figures fell, their final words chilling Logan to the core. You are the first, but you will not be the last. The last assassin collapsed, leaving only silence. Xyra stood frozen, staring at her glowing wrist. What does this mean? She whispered. Logan clenched his fists. It means we need answers. And fast. The High Council gathered themselves, shaken but alive. Saurian's expression was grim. The past is awakening, he murmured. And your bond is at the center of it. Xyra and Logan exchanged a look. Something ancient was stirring. And whatever it wasn't done with them yet. The chase across the stars. Logan Carter tightened his grip on the stolen Zayari cruiser's controls as alarms blared around him. The ship was moving way too fast for comfort, but it wasn't like they had much of a choice. Behind them, 3 Zayari warships were in pursuit, their energy cannons charging up for another shot. Each blast barely missed, shaking the ship violently as Logan struggled to keep it steady. Xyra, any chance you can tell them we're not traitors before they blow us to pieces? He shouted over the chaos. Princess Xyra was at the co-pilot station, rapidly pressing holographic keys in the ship's system. They're not listening. The High Council has declared us fugitives. Lady Valus is leading the charge. Logan swore under his breath. Of course she is. Ever since the attack on the High Council chamber, everything had spiraled into madness. The revelation that the Soulmate device wasn't of Zayari origin had shattered everything Xyra had believed. And the masked assassins, their last words still haunted Logan's mind. You are the first, but you will not be the last. Who were they? What were they trying to stop? There wasn't time to figure it out, not with half the Zayari fleet chasing them across the star system. Hold on. Logan jerked the controls, diving the ship toward the thick asteroid belt ahead. The cruiser shuddered, engines screaming in protest. Xyra's eyes widened. You are insane. Yeah, well, it's better than getting vaporized. The ship plunged into the asteroid field. Massive rocks tumbled around them, some the size of small moons. Logan gritted his teeth, weaving through the deadly debris as the Zayari warships hesitated at the edge. Xyra checked the scanners. They're waiting for us to make a mistake. Logan gave her a tight grin. Then we just won't make any. Xyra muttered something in Zayari, probably an insult, before focusing back on the ship's systems. The chase continued for several agonizing minutes, dodging between asteroids, skimming too close to disaster. The Zayari ships fired sporadically, but their shots were blocked by the massive floating rocks. Then suddenly, the ships stopped. Logan frowned. Why aren't they following? Xyra's face paled as she looked at the scanners. Because something else is in here with us. Logan followed her gaze to the screen. A massive energy signature was moving toward them, slow, deliberate, and wrong. And then, from the darkness, it emerged. A colossal ancient vessel drifted through the asteroid belt, its surface covered in glowing symbols. It was unlike any ship Logan had ever seen. Massive, triangular, and impossibly old. It pulsed with an eerie golden light, the same color as Zyra's Soulmate Device. Logan's stomach twisted. Zyra, what the hell is that? Zyra stared at the ship, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know. But the moment she spoke, the Soulmate Device on her wrist reacted. A shockwave of energy rippled outward, and the ancient ship responded. A golden beam locked onto their cruiser, freezing them in place. Logan cursed, slamming the controls. We're caught. The ship's system shut down. Every light, every function, leaving them floating helplessly in the asteroid field. And then a voice, deep, ancient, and layered with something inhuman, filled the ship. You have awakened the bond. Enter and remember. Logan and Zyra exchanged a look. The golden light intensified. And before either of them could react, everything around them disappeared. The forgotten past. When Logan opened his eyes, he wasn't in the ship anymore. He stood in an open field beneath a sky filled with two suns. The air was warm, carrying the scent of something unfamiliar. In the distance, a massive temple stood tall, its surface carved with the same glowing symbols from the ancient ship. Zyra was beside him, looking equally confused. Where are we? She whispered. Logan shook his head. I have no idea. Suddenly, figures appeared around them, hazy, like ghosts from a dream. Tall, robed beings with elongated features, their eyes glowing with golden light. They moved with purpose, whispering in a language Logan didn't understand, yet somehow felt in his bones. And then, he saw them. Two figures stood at the temple's entrance. One was human, the other was Zyra. Logan felt his pulse quicken. That's. Zyra gasped. Us. The human and Zyra figures turned toward each other, their soulmate devices glowing in sync. A powerful surge of energy pulsed between them, forming a bridge of light. And then, war erupted. Explosions filled the sky. Ships descended, weapons firing. The temple shook as enemy forces stormed forward, trying to stop whatever was happening. The human and Zyra pair fought side by side, their bond fueling something unstoppable. The vision blurred, and Logan suddenly understood. This wasn't the first time a human and Zyra had been bonded. It had happened before, long ago, and someone had erased it from history. Before he could say anything, the vision shattered. The escape. Logan jolted back into reality, gasping for breath. The cockpit was intact. The alarms had stopped, but Zyra's face told him everything. You saw it too, Logan said, voice hoarse. Zyra slowly nodded. Yes. The Soulmate Device on her wrist pulsed one final time before dimming, as if exhausted. Outside, the ancient ship released their cruiser, letting them drift free. The Zyra warships were still waiting at the edge of the asteroid field, but something had changed. They weren't chasing anymore. Logan swallowed hard. So, what now? Zyra exhaled, steadying herself. We need to find out who erased the truth, and why they don't want it coming back. Logan glanced at the scanners. Well, that's gonna be tricky. Zyra frowned. Why? Logan turned the display toward her. The Zyra fleet was retreating, once, twice. Then, a shockwave of golden energy burst from her wrist, rippling outward. Logan barely had time to react before his vision split. Suddenly, he wasn't in the cockpit anymore. He was somewhere else. A battlefield. Human and Zyra warriors stood together, their weapons glowing with the same golden energy that pulsed from Zyra's device. They fought together, moving as one, faster, stronger. The enemy forces, shadowy figures, much like the ones chasing them now, fell before them. Then Logan saw himself, or someone like him, a human warrior standing beside a Ziyari princess. And they weren't just fighting. They were winning. The vision shattered. Logan gasped, snapping back into the cockpit. The Soulmate device on Xyra's wrist was glowing brighter than ever, and the enemy warship was stalling. "They're afraid," Xyra whispered. Logan let out a breathless laugh. "Good." The enemy ship hesitated, its cannons charging but not firing. The voice came through again, this time uncertain. "You were not supposed to awaken." Xyra's eyes burned with resolve. Too late. She slammed a command into the console. The ship's systems rebooted, power surging back to the engines. Logan saw their chance. "Hang on." He punched the hyperdrive controls. A flash of light engulfed them. The enemy ship lunged forward, firing one last desperate shot. But it was too late. The stars stretched and warped as their cruiser vanished into hyperspace. The aftermath. When they emerged from hyperspace, the ship was barely holding together. Smoke curled from the consoles. The lights flickered, and the oxygen levels were dropping fast. Logan slumped back in his chair, exhaling hard. "Okay. That sucked." Xyra turned to him, breathing just as heavily. "We're alive." Logan chuckled, despite himself. "Yeah. For now." Xyra studied the Soulmate device on her wrist. The golden glow was fading, but it wasn't gone. "What we saw," she murmured. "It wasn't just a vision." Logan nodded. It was history. A long silence stretched between them. Xyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. "If the past was erased, then we have a responsibility to bring it back." Logan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You do realize what that means, right?" Xyra's lips curled into a smirk. "It means we're going to war." Logan grinned. "Now that's a royal decree I can get behind." Their ship drifted through the void, barely functioning, hunted by an enemy older than history itself. But for the first time since this whole mess started, Logan and Xyra weren't running anymore. They had a fight to finish. And this time, they were ready. The fate they chose. The galaxy had changed. Logan Carter stood on the bridge of the stolen Ziyari cruiser, staring out at the swirling clouds of a gas giant below. The ship was battered, barely functional after their escape, but it had held together, just like him and Tyra. The golden glow of her Soulmate device had dimmed to a steady pulse, but Logan still felt it. A bond that wasn't just legend, not just fate. It was a war cry. Behind him, Xyra stood at the console, her golden eyes scanning incoming transmissions. They had been in hiding for 2 days, repairing the ship, waiting for a response from the last message she had sent. And now finally, a signal came through. Xyra inhaled sharply. They answered. Logan turned. "Who?" She locked eyes with him. The ones who still remember the truth. The main screen flickered, and suddenly, they were no longer alone. A holographic projection of an elderly Ziyari woman appeared. She was dressed in old ceremonial robes, her face lined with age and wisdom. Logan recognized her instantly. The leader of the exiled ones. Those who had once spoken of the ancient bonds between humans and Ziyari before they were silenced. Xyra straightened. "High Elder Serana, we need your help." The old woman's gaze was sharp, scanning both Xyra and Logan. When she spoke, her voice was firm. "We have been waiting for you." Logan raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, because last time I checked, we just started running for our lives a few days ago." Serana smiled slightly. "You are not the first to bear this bond. You are merely the first in this age." Xyra's jaw tightened. "We saw the truth. We saw the war. The Ziyari and humans were never meant to be separate." Serana nodded. "And yet, for centuries, the High Council buried the past. The soulmate devices, once used to strengthen our people, were altered, modified, controlled. Logan exhaled. Yeah, figured that out the hard way. Serana's gaze darkened. They feared what you and the princess represent. The last time a human and a Zayari were bound, it nearly changed the fate of the entire galaxy. Zyra's eyes narrowed. Why? Serana was silent for a moment. Then she raised a hand. The holographic screen shifted, displaying a star map. A location flashed in the center. Logan leaned forward. What am I looking at? Serana's voice was quiet, but filled with meaning. The resting place of the first bond. Logan felt something cold settle in his chest. You mean the human and Zayari we saw in the visions? Serana nodded. Their legacy was erased, but their power still sleeps. Sira inhaled. And the High Council isn't just afraid of us. They're afraid of what we might awaken. Serana's expression hardened. You must reach that world before the enemy does. If you do, you may find the key to restoring what was lost. Logan folded his arms. And if we don't? Serana's gaze darkened. Then the enemy will ensure the past remains buried, permanently. Race against time. The stolen cruiser limped through hyperspace, barely holding together. The battle had left them with limited fuel, and their weapons were nearly useless. Logan sat in the pilot's chair, running through every possible scenario in his head. None of them ended well. All right, he said. We're heading toward an ancient, possibly cursed, definitely forgotten planet that may or may not hold the key to undoing an entire conspiracy, and we have no backup. Zira glanced at him. Correct. Logan exhaled. You ever make better life choices? Zyra's lips twitched slightly. Not since I met you. He smirked. Fair. Their destination was Verakish 9, a dead world on the edge of Zayari space. It had been marked as uninhabitable centuries ago, but Logan knew better. Places weren't labeled forbidden without a damn good reason. As they dropped out of hyperspace, the planet came into view. Dark, desolate, covered in the ruins of an ancient city. Massive towers stretched toward the sky, cracked and crumbling. But at the center of it all, a temple. The same one they had seen in the visions. Logan clenched the controls. Well, that's ominous. Zyra checked the scanners. No ships detected. That's even more ominous. She shot him a look. Would you prefer to be shot at? Logan sighed. I just don't like walking into quiet places that should have enemies waiting. As if on cue, the soulmate device on Zyra's wrist pulsed again. The temple responded, sending out a faint golden signal. Zyra's expression turned grim. It's calling us. Logan cracked his knuckles. Then let's answer. The temple's secret. The air inside the temple was thick with dust and silence. Logan stepped carefully over cracked stone, his blaster drawn. Zyra moved beside him, her every step cautious but purposeful. The deeper they went, the more the walls seemed to glow with faint ancient energy. Then, they reached the center. A massive stone pedestal stood before them, covered in symbols that matched the ones on Zyra's soulmate device, and resting at the top. 2 rings, glowing, ancient, one sized for a Zayari, one sized for a human. Logan swallowed. Okay, that's weirdly specific. Zyra reached forward, hesitating only a moment before touching the smaller ring. The room shifted. A golden light surrounded them, and suddenly, they weren't alone. Ghostly figures appeared around them, images from the past, just like in the vision before. And standing at the pedestal were the same 2 figures they had seen before. The first bonded pair, the human warrior and the Zayari princess. Their voices were faint, but Logan could hear them. We were not meant to be forgotten. The images flickered. Our bond was not weakness. It was power. Zyra's hand trembled against the ring. They're speaking to us. The ancient Zayari princess turned toward Syra, her golden eyes filled with sorrow. "They will come for you." Logan stiffened.